Hello, everybody, and welcome to another RCT2 review stream. After a few days off, we are back. Today, we're looking at Baker Lake Amusement Park by Coupon. This came out a couple of years ago. I want to say around 2016, maybe, but I'm not certain on that. And this is a realistic park set up in Washington near Seattle. And has some really nice details, some great architecture, solid coasters, and some pretty good details also. So let's jump in and take a look here. We'll go through the park as we usually do, and then we'll go look at the outskirts and all those other bits and pieces. So here at the entrance, we have a nice, charming entrance to start. So this is sort of one color, really, with some accent pieces, which I kind of like. How kind of monochrome the peach coloration is here with these little brown accents across the top, the black roofs, and then these colored awnings. I mean, there's certainly room for color, but I honestly think this stands out really, really well, and it looks good. I think, if anything, I would have maybe considered sort of these little squares and rectangles that are insets to be maybe a different color just to stand it out some more, but the detail is great. And then it's just some of these little like edge corner pieces where you have sort of this ridged detail. It looks really, really nice. Couple of towers here to really define those spaces, plus this kind of main tower to anchor it. And then we have the diagonal piece and the forwards kind of orthogonal piece here, which is kind of nice because this one picks up and carries across the crosswalk into the parking lot. And then this one over here kind of carries in this direction where you're going to be getting all the people from this side and all of this kind of stuff. And then theoretically, this being some kind of bus lane, because there's a little bus stop with a cool sign there and everything else. So it's clearly well thought out, covers the space as well. Generally small, but I think Coupon's architecture on the whole is small. But lots of little great architectural details here, and kind of carries around the backside too. We have the offices here with the employee parking back here. And then these little golf carts here on the back made out of the blocks, which is very cool. Coming in, we have this star fountain here, and then the carousel off to the side. So this is Grand National with a nice little custom covering over top of it. The hidden queue line, although the electronic sign is still there, which I tend to just make those invisible, and that's as easy as going into the tile inspector, checking that one out, and then just putting a null object under the queue line. I think it's an easy way to get rid of those. I've never been to a park that's had a scrolling electronic sign over top of their ride entries, so I think it just looks a little nicer. So we come in and we have our nice little main street here with some good little buildings, 2 to 3 stories, nice little parapet walls on top, and then some great little details here. So Rocket Donuts, which I believe is a franchise up in that area of the country, has a cool sign here with the little circular donut sign and then the little jet or gun or thing here. It looks like a little jet up on its side on top, which I just love. And then there's a little railing here to give this a little bit of a curve, because we have some diagonal bits here. One of the key things to pay attention to when you're doing a main street is to make sure that it's not just a flat facade. You never want it to be flat. Have it bump out a little bit here and there and just really vary that kind of a thing. I mean, you look at this and this is almost continuous, but then you set this one back and then carry this guy around the corner, and then you can see all the little bits and pieces inside. I think one of my comments would be that you set up the main street to this building here, and generally you're setting up to some kind of a focal point, which this is not. It's a nice, pleasant architecture, nice little cafe, but it's not really anything in particular. Like whether you set it up to a ride, and it doesn't have to be like the signature ride in the park, but kind of set up to a something, or even like a view of the lake potentially. But a little bit odd potentially to set up there, but it does have this great little seating area. Kind of down here by the lake. And then on the back side here, we have a custom ride. This is a pirate ship. So there's usually a couple of ways to go about this. You can either hack the ride with, a wooden coaster train or something like that. You can do it full scenery like this one, or you just do a working ride that also has scenery for when it's stopped. Coupon went for the full scenery option here. I tend to like to see them working, but at the same time, this one gets more detail and you can actually theme it to look a little bit better. So I like that a lot. You'll notice the queue here is a quarter queue. I know I've said in some of my previous videos that I'm not a huge fan of quarter queue just with the peeps. especially when you look at something down here where we use the full queue. To me, that kind of calls out these rides that are static, that are just scenery made when you don't have the full queue. It looks better just from a peeps or from a visual RCT standpoint. This looks better than this, in my opinion, because it seems more peep scale as far as queue lines go. Because really, you don't often see a 6 or 8 foot wide pathway here as a queue line. So this looks better, but when you consider the peeps, it doesn't. And I think even when the ride doesn't work, you still need to make it consistent. Although there are some sections here that we'll see where he's used the quarter path but still overlaid a queue on top of it, which is a good option too. But again, consistency is the thing that wins for me. Next over here is actually one of my favorite bits in the park. This is a little ropes course. Not active. You can roll a miniature golf course across, and at least the peeps can walk around it. But there's some bits that you can't do here, which is a bit of a shame, but this is really cool. So we're using some coaster track here for a little ladder, and then these kind of scenery pieces here, piece of twisted coaster track there for a walk, and then a couple of these other bits and pieces. And then here we have this little rope swing out into the water, presumably, that you climb up and then head on out. Really, really nice. I love that. It just looks good in general, sort of this whole adventure tower thing kind of squeezed in here. It almost looks like it was squeezed in more recent years, which I quite like. Spin around, and we have another great little restaurant here, and kind of brings us into our first area here with this coaster. So we'll pick this up as it's going out. So this is the Corkscrew, according to the name, which I'm guessing is a misspelling. I believe Lewis made this one, and a couple of the other ones in the park. So this is a kind of sort of recreation of an Arrow double loop double corkscrew. The real thing, the corkscrews go the other way and the trains are longer, it's kind of, you can kind of consider it as an Arrow custom looping coaster, which I think is probably more accurately what it would be. And I like that idea because it lets you make something that looks a little more appropriate for RCT, with the corkscrews going in that direction, so you don't have to go real wide out and then come back in, since we don't have the diagonal corks, which I get. I like that. I'm not as big of a fan of the queue line entrance being way over here. Usually you don't want to put a building in between your visible ride and the queue entry itself. That's kind of a weird spot to stick it. And then also kind of crossing the back of house entry here. I mean, there's clearly some kind of a gate here, and then these fencing, which is presumably removable or something like that, but not necessarily something I would pick there, but potentially bridge it, or if you're going to have additional queue over this way. Quick nod to that sign before we move along. We'll pick that up a little bit later. But great supports, really nicely done there with the lattice supports. A little bit chunky, but looks good on the whole. All right, so we'll come around here to some more buildings, and consistently nice buildings. A lot of detail on them. A lot of the crown molding, and then just the deco pieces, which is totally fine. You just got to watch out for getting to a point where you're going to have too much deco. So two rides here, side by side, which are maybe not the best side by side rides. We have an octopus here and an Eli Bridge scrambler here that kind of do the same thing. They both rotate and spin an arm. This one just happens to bounce. Not to say that a park wouldn't necessarily do that, but I think just from a variety standpoint, I like to kind of spread out my rides that do the same sort of motion from each other, so you don't have a similar kind of nature of movement across the pathway from each other. But I really do like this octopus ride out here along the water. We have our little seawall decor here, and then just equally really nice is this curved and the decking out here from this restaurant that sticks out over top of the water. Really nice striking yellow umbrellas. A lot of different colored umbrellas here. You got the yellow here, yellow striped here, orange striped here, red here. Generally, you want to be a little consistent with your umbrellas, but there's honestly, you look around and there's only a couple of colors, so I think that's generally okay. So next up here, we have something that's a little bit of kind of confused as to what it wants to be. So this is a Pacific Coaster, according to the sign, which I think Pacific Coaster actually did this layout. The new element user, not the ride. But the ride name is the Mackle Mouse, which we'll consider that one a little bit regrettable, but you know, Macklemore's all right, I suppose. This is a really nice recreation of a large park wild mouse from Mock Rides. They're kind of hard to do in the game, considering that they're a big triangle, and this game doesn't handle diagonal very well. You can see that he's merged the mini coaster track with the wild mouse, and that's probably the best way to do it. But this is a great layout for one. It's pretty well done. It just looks good on the whole. I would have made the station platform invisible since it is so easy to do these days. But on the whole, it's nice. Again, good support work. This little curved mini suspended piece, it looks good in the game, but it's not necessarily something you see on a lot of support work. Not necessarily with this curved piece. I can think of a few instances, but not on that one necessarily. So here's a pretty cool little detail. So this is the Candy Company building, and inside you can see some of these smoke pieces, and then you have these towers here, and then on the back there's a couple of like almost some kind of like sugar canister tower here, which I do like. As far as being a candy company goes, I almost would expect this building to be like in your face bright, like really bright colors, rather than this little more subdued here. But I do like the architecture, and it looks good. And I've always been a big fan of using these kind of windows where you can put the glass behind it and then still have a see-through, and it still looks pretty classy on the whole. Over here we have an Enterprise, again with the hidden platform, which I'm a fan of. Here is one of those instances of the quarter queue that still has the regular queue over top of it. No real issues there, except when you get into weird stuff like this where they kind of walk on the outside, so this hut should have probably been turned here. So it ends up with a little bit wonky here. I mean, the only challenge here is when you get the backup of Peeps, and then it just looks a little weird. Kind of equally weird, we have our double SNS shot towers here that have the entrances out here. You can kind of see them with the scrolling sign, which again make it visible. Not using here, which is a shame because this sign is super cool. Like, it looks like a wait time sign and then maybe a fast pass sign with this cool cantilever wire here and the big footer and the tower and then the height stick. Lovely sign, really great detail. And then this queue structure is wild. I love it, with the curved monorail and then the awnings around it. Just looks gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So really nicely done there. And those sorts of building varieties are the things that I really like about this kind of work. Good tower on the whole. So Sky Screamer, nice colors on it with the red, green, yellow, and purple. Kind of almost Mardi Gras-esque colors. I would have maybe made one launch and one drop, but no reason they can't both be launched. Seen it plenty of times. Here you have another closed ride, the Super Loop, little Larson Super Looper. Nice idea using the fancy monorail trains, what are these? The retro style monorail trains for the vehicle. I know the real ones are a little bit longer, but it's kind of hard. You got to strike a balance in there somewhere, and I think that looks nice. Would have been cool to get this thing to run, even though those monorail vehicles wouldn't be able to make those the draw for the loop. So I kind of get that. All right, so on this side here, we're going to take a look at this coaster, which is a Togo stand-up coaster. And kind of what I like about this park is that it seems like a lot of their older rides were more stock models, which makes sense for a small park that's growing up. So like standard-ish, I mean not custom, but still standard-ish Arrow Corkscrew, standard Wild Mouse. And then here we have what's sort of kind of patterned after a standard Togo stand-up coaster. This one most accurately reflects what's going on at or what was at Canada's Wonderland Skyrider. It is now in Italy as Freestyle, and bright yellow. But this is nice looking. I kind of like the white and gray, which feels very Japanese. Nice general layout. To match the real thing, this hill needs to be a little bit higher. The trick track here does exist on the one in Canada. It's the only one from Togo, as far as I am aware, that has that. The rest of them have a little mini airtime hills, and then just some airtime hills here along in the to finish up would have been nice. But only one train here, unfortunately. I don't know if we could have had a second one on the transfer track here, perhaps just to get a little bit of detail in there. But it's nice. It fits really well, and it looks good. One comment that I will have as far as an execution standpoint goes, so I started doing this in a couple of my parks, and a lot of people have followed suit since. I'll clean this one, I guess. The yellow footers, which makes sense when they're around the road. You either have bollards around the footer itself where you paint it yellow or something like that, basically so the cars don't run into it. That's all well and good, but if you put all the footers in the road that the car can't pass, then it's really not useful. So in this situation, I would think the park either would have modified this to span the roadway here or move the roadway. So looks nice, but it doesn't necessarily work in this kind of instance here where it doesn't practically make sense, even though it does have a good overall look and it tells you thought through those details for it. All right, so let's move along, and we have to get to Tidal Wave. So this is our next one. Pretty simple little splash boats type ride here, but nice little bridge coming across. You have the splash side and the dry side on there, just a split single path, which I think is fine. 3 boats, which feels about right. You don't usually want any more than that, even though the game is going to want to give you a bunch more, typically. I like the details here, like the guide coming down. The colors are nice on this, and the support work, again, is pretty top-notch. And a little bit hidden back here, but you see the path coming along, and you have this nice view there. I'd almost take out these couple of trees, so that from here you can really get a good view of that drop in the back, since it is sort of tucked back in there. But so coming along, we kind of finish our little loop here. This is a good park layout, by the way. Let's back it up. It's a small park, for one, but it's a good park layout. It has essentially one big loop that has a side loop here, a side loop here, and then kind of a loop / dead end on this side. So it's really just a big fat dead end, so it is more like a loop than anything. But it's simple, easy to understand, and all the stuff comes off of it in a really natural way. So well thought out there, for one. So here we enter the Boardwalk section, which is maybe my favorite section in the park, although some of the other areas are going to give it a run for its money also. So we have a couple of things here to take a look at. First of all, just a great selection of facades here. We have our Sky Ride coming over top, the Seaside Express up and over the lake here. I always do love seeing a good Sky Ride, and nice details there with the posts and everything. Footers out of the water before the pylon starts. And then just some nice little details there for each of those towers. So done well there. Little theater here, presumably for a fireworks show or a laser show or something out there. Would have been nice to get a little bit of detail out there as to what that is necessarily, whether it's a ski show or jet skis or whatever that may be, just to show you what you're looking at. But I do like that look. So then here we have an interesting one. So this is Golden Zephyr, and we're going to pick this guy up on the first drop. So if you are familiar with coasters, you may know what this coaster is based on. And we'll talk about that in a minute here. So we have this great kind of double out and back U-shaped layout. Diagonal drop over there. Then we have another diagonal coming through here. A really nice stacked top section on this one tower worth of structure. And then we're going to really just loop all the structures down here in the bottom. So we have this guy coming around, and then he's going to wrap all the way around out into the brake run over here. So this, if you have not guessed yet, is a recreation of Dragon Coaster at Ride Playland in New York. It's a really old, famous, pretty historic coaster. And like I said, a pretty famous layout. Beautiful looking layout too, and done pretty well here. I like this curved station with the monorail track. So inside the station isn't necessarily curved, or maybe a little bit, but It's hidden well, so it looks like it's a full curve station, which I really do like. I don't think Space Gauge Morgan trains were a thing at the time, but now that would be a better pick here. But the PTCs make sense also with the 6-car train. Anyway, a beautiful looking coaster. We have some of the car ride track here, which is just some coaster detailing. Ideally, this sits a little bit lower, but it starts to get glitchy when it does, so it's hard to really strike a balance there. But this was kind of a pleasant surprise. I recall opening the park the first time, just because you don't usually see wooden coasters recreated. Steel coasters all day long, but you usually don't see wooden coasters recreated, especially old ones. So this is pretty neat. And if you ever do get up to the real ride Playland, which is just north of New York City, it is worth the trip. Coaster is average, but it's a piece of history. Definitely worth seeing. All right, so let's get over here a little bit to a couple of different parts and pieces. We have a trio of static rides here, which was a little bit sad because it would have been neat to see all of these rides run. But that said, they all look really nice. So first of all, we have our spinning ride here, which I would have gone through and named all of these just so that we at least know what the ride would have been called, should it have been operating. So this is an old like Traverse Circle Swing. Kind of fits alongside the historic wooden coaster here. And then we have some more modern stuff on this side. There's a big top spin here with some pretty cool water splash elements. A little bit of a question on the clearance here with the queue line, but I think it would be all right on the whole. Similar questions of clearance with this rainbow ride, where it goes kind of horizontally around while the vehicle stays upright. This one's pretty close to the one that I had done at Six Flags Carolina, and I think there's some similar looking details that are just really nice, and it looks good. In the corner here, we have a 3-point shot basketball challenge. Love the backboard and net created with the objects. Done really well there, and then all the different parts and pieces of the maps for like the prizes and things. And then up under here, we have a little dark ride. So this is the Baker Lake Funhouse. Again, the quarter queue, it's not operating. I'm not quite sure why it's not operating, because it would be neat to have some activation here. Essentially, we've got 4 rides, but none of them are going. So it's a little bit of a shame there for one, but it would be neat to see that go. And then kind of surrounding all of it, we have a pretty nice selection of architecture. So we have our little ice cream cone here on the side from a detail standpoint. We have this building in the middle, which I like with the curve. What I don't necessarily like is kind of how wonky the building is shaped. So we have Tower 1 and Tower 2 here, kind of sort of on a straight section with a little bit of a curve here, but it bumps out here, and then it has a random bump here. The form is nice in the detail, but the form overall is not necessarily my favorite. It kind of seems like detail for detail's sake. So a little bit of a shaping would make a little more sense. Kind of like this guy, where you have a clear defined main entry point here with the sign sandwiched between 2 towers, and you have a little bit of a diagonal curved section here where the path expands, and then a tower to finish it off over there. So to me, this one speaks better than this one from an architectural standpoint. All right, so let's turn the corner and take a look over here, which according to the sign on this side is northwest. So I think this is sort of the Pacific Northwest kind of industrial-ish type theme. So the first one we get to here, we'll look at the kids area first before we get to the bigger coaster. So this is Crop Duster. This is a Vekoma little kids coaster, and I think it's cute. Have our little farmland underneath. You can kind of see all the different rows of the crops and things like that, and a nice little helix up around the lift hill, and then back and into the station. Nice simple layout, looks good supports. Again, the mini coaster probably isn't needed, but it looks good in RCT, so why not? And then we have a little wind turbine here that also looks quite nice and is done well. And then on this side, there's a couple of different bits. So we have this guy here, Apple Picker. She have this theme like an apple tree. I remember we pointed out on G-Force's Southwinds Park that he had the similar the kite-eating tree in the Snoopy Land with the pieces here, and you couldn't really see it because of the landscaping behind it. This one's a little more readable since you can have that contrast behind it, so that's a nice addition there. Then we have a couple of these 2x2 rides. So we have the Sally's sheep here, and then here's the Andy's apples, and then over here is Patrick's peaches. Appreciate the alliteration and the consistency between them all. I think that's nice. A little fountain here that feels almost misplaced just because it kind of feels you're squeezing around it to get anywhere, but I do like the fountain, plus the little cart here on this little kind of odd section of brick. And then the play area here, a pretty small little play area, but something that could be fun for the kids. So nicely done there. Now we're actually going to keep marching up this way, and then we'll circle around and end with the two big coasters. So here we have the Lakeside Swinger, Chance Swing, or Chance Yo-Yo, I suppose, is what their model is, alongside some pretty nice detailing here with sort of this clapboard wood look, and I do like the blue, the black, and the brown working together. Again, nice structure, sort of this porch around the whole thing, and then the nice brightly colored umbrellas outside. Over here is a tractor with a little waterfall behind it. Just this great little vignette of a sign. Maybe a little bit odd since it's back so far. This is a good place for it, I think, as you kind of come up into this. But the path transitioned way back here into this sort of dirt-ish path, which is not my favorite, but oddly it works really well here for whatever reason. And I think it looks nice, but it has a lot of texture that repeats, so you can really probably here is the best area to see just how repetitive it can be when you look at it in a big swath, but it works pretty well here, especially with the detail. Then we have Buzzsaw. Here's a Chance Chaos. It's a nice little ride here with the queue cover that looks pretty nice. I like these little dormer type windows up on top, and then across the way another little restaurant here with some good detailing, and then the turn around the restroom sign here, which has the little blue on this side, and then when we were looking the other way, that side was pink for the two men's and women's restroom. All right, so back here we have a little bit of a hidden ride that I'm a big fan of. It's a log flume. This is Log Runner from Hopkins. Queue line over here, again using the quarter queue, but running the regular queue through it. You can kind of see why I think it looks a little bit weird, because you got this beautiful queue, and then you have the peeps just kind of plowing right through the railings. So that's not my favorite detail. I would have rather just be consistent, use the big queue line, and then just theme it. But the actual theming on this area is beautiful. Really, really great. Kind of these big pot still type things with the different logs cut down here, and this mine train track that comes across, breaks for the flume to come through, and then carries out again onto the pathway. Really leads your eye up to the building itself. And then we get into the actual ride here, which has a lot of layered pieces. Maybe a little bit too much as far as layering goes. So if we click on a lot of this, we've got wooden coaster, we've got the bobsled, we've got the log flume itself, and then there's some other bits and pieces in here, but can be a little bit much sometimes. But what I do like is this big tunnel here. So turn around and we have this probably best seen from right here. You have this little rock tunnel with the fog effects and everything, and then it drops through, and you have just kind of a long outrun to the other side where it pops out here, and then wrapping around to lift number 2 where it comes up. You see above the trees as you carry around to the little operator booth, and then we drop down using the water slide track, which I think is probably the best if you want to do steep variety. I think it looks nice. And then big splash down here over top of the exit ramp, as you should. And a decently visual area here. I understand that it's meant to be woodsy, but I would almost have taken out these couple of trees here just so you can see the whole thing and get a better view. You have some spots here where it really does open up a little bit, but would have been cool to see the whole thing. These little markers here, I'm guessing, are these water splash kind of controlled by guests, which is a nice little detail. Always do like to see that. But on the whole, this is a great looking ride. Love the tree popping up through this structure here that's falling apart. So lots of cool little details like that. Across the way we have this barn, and it's set up for a Screamin swing, even though the Screamin swing isn't there, unfortunately. And I would have liked to have seen that. It feels very Dollywood and Silver Dollar City-esque, since this is the same kind of theme that they went through, like a barnstormer theme. But I do like it a lot. Looks good. Back here we have another little shop before we move it along and pick up our last two rides, the two coasters. So this is Coal Blaster. This is an SNS power ride, sort of similar to Powder Keg up at Silver Dollar City, and actually a lot of this section of the park has that same feel to it. So we launched out over that hill, and then we have some kind of fast bits here. It's generally sort of an L-shaped out and back layout with some more twists to it. And then it will kind of turn around here towards the end where we have this little figure eight. And then we come back up and into the brakes. A little bit fast on the beginning with this low hill here with a fair bit of airtime. I'd almost nearly stall out your coaster here. What you should consider when you do a launch coaster, a lot of parks really look at this as when they design launch coasters, is making sure that you launch proof a ride so that you have the tallest section here just after the launch, so that if you have a misfire on the launch, it's either going to roll back into the launch where it's easily resettable, or if it clears that, it's got clearly enough momentum, but just creeps over the top to make it the whole way around without having to valley and creating a costly and time-consuming rescue. So that's something to consider. I feel like if this was a little bit taller and then you get a little bit of that speed variation too, which I think just looks better rather than carrying it through at a pretty fast speed, could be all right with this speed hill there. Then this turnaround, which almost feels maybe a little bit too fast, but I do like how it works around the flume here, and then I like this figure eight finale. I know we kind of complained about this in Belgian Park Terra Fantasia, where you have the two coasters here that kind of have a similar deal with out and back L shape. So if you look at this, this is kind of doing the same sort of thing here, but on the whole, it's similar to it, but not totally. So I don't really fault this one here. I think it looks fine. Got lots of great details on this one. So I love the little Blue Canyon sign up top here. The conveyor belt coming up. Here's a little mine cart that comes across and almost looks like a transfer track for the ride with the queue line up underneath. Just such a cool design for this whole area here. I like the queue entry underneath the station building because it's exceedingly obvious where your ride entry is when it's in the station itself. And then look at this exit coming down off of this little mine cart ramp, essentially. And then you come down and there's a fence right across the way, and that's when you go out onto the main path. But then the theming continues on down into this mine shaft that's filled with the smoke and everything. So really great way to tie in the theming to the ride, to a functional ride exit as well. So lots of good little details there that I'm a pretty big fan of. Alrighty, so then the last one we get to here is Tempesto. Tempesto is a V&M hypercoaster, 2015, themed to a steel mill. According to the sign here, this is Tempesto Steel. So let's pick up our ride vehicle here. Little 8-car train. This is kind of a mini hyper, sort of on the lines of Goliath at Laron, more so than maybe Goliath at Over Georgia. But we have a great slow hill here, another one here. B&M hypercoasters are consistent. You don't get a tractor airtime, so you don't want a really fast low hill unless it's drawn out really well, kind of like that turn. But they have really nice floater hills, which all of these are doing really, really well, and then into this sort of figure eight-ish finale as it comes up, and then into this inclined brake run coming here. So on the whole, this is really nice. It feels like one of the more recent B&M hypercoasters from that 2015 time frame. Supports are looking good too, although there's probably too many of them. This lift hill could probably do with maybe 4 supports on the whole. It doesn't need any more than that. Again, I'll make the same criticism of the footers in the road, especially with a new coaster such as this, where it's a custom layout, so the footers or the supports would have avoided the road entirely rather than the other way around. So just something to consider as far as that goes. But a really, really nice layout. Just looks good. It keeps the pacing up really well and works quite nicely. A little bit short on the brake run, perhaps, or at least is broken up by the corners. Just one realism note: if you're looking for that kind of a thing, the transfer track wouldn't necessarily go here right at the very first opportunity for this to stop. It'd go a little further on, so you should be able to really stop a train and then have the train, and then the transfer track is there. So um, little things here and there, but it's really such a minuscule thing that it's fine to ignore. Then we have our service road that kind of wraps all the way around back here for the entire area. One of the things that I would note is that it really doesn't have an opportunity to go into the park any particular places. It touches a lot of the back of house areas, but if you need to get vehicles into the park, like a fire truck or things like that, there really aren't much opportunities to do that in any one particular place. Right here is probably your main opportunity coming along the backside, but something to consider is sort of some regular access points to those. But around the back, we do have some pretty cool things here. So here's a couple of used rides, so spinning teacups. Here's a Troika arm, and a couple of bobsled cars, which I'm guessing were for the Troika. So that's pretty neat. And then back here we have a concert venue hall. I don't know what it's called because the building isn't named, but really nice U-shaped seating area here with the sound booth in the back, some nice light towers here, a couple of speaker arrays. It just looks really nice on the whole. It's done well, cut into the landscape a little bit. Little set of shops in the back here, another little ice cream detail there. And then I like this where it's a, actually let me remove some trees so you can see it a little bit. This is kind of nice where it's on the service road, but cuts across, so that they could take these gates and open them up to close this off and bring stuff through, but otherwise it's opened up for people to pass back and forth. I think that's a pretty nice little detail. And then here's a little maintenance area too, with some more golf carts. Kind of undersized depending on what it's for, but the details are really, really nice. You got your ladder here, some signs, bollards on the sides. The stairs here are a little bit odd, perhaps, but as far as just architectural detailing goes, it's pretty nice. So we're kind of backtracking here, coming from this theater, crossing this diagonal bridge across the highway, which I do like quite a bit, and then takes us into kind of a little section of the overall water park. None of this is operable, unfortunately. Would have been really nice to see some of this have some motion to it, even though the peeps aren't here. But nice bowl slide, pretty big, but it looks good. And then a couple of slide complexes over here with some pretty good supports, and then the two drop down ones here, the green and the blue, and then the yellow one goes to us splash out on the backside here. So nicely done. They're just from structure standpoint, they're just pleasant. They look good. It's a good way to kind of fill a section of the map, even though there's not a whole lot going on with it. This is Baker Cove, the water park here. There's blue bollards along the front here, and a nice kind of northwestish looking entrance. Kind of has that heavy timber look to it. And then their own little parking lot here, and then some employee sections here with the little Baker Lake sign, and here we have the bridge over top to the back areas, and that internal employee parking lot there, although no cars here, which would have been kind of nice to see those parked. Using a road sign on this bridge, which I do like, so Seattle 30 miles away, which gives us a little bit of a clue as to where the park is in relation to the United States. Here's a little sign that almost kind of looks like a Best Western type sign. I don't know if there was meant to be more here or if that's meant to represent the all of this. Some more little details here along the highway. So here's a couple of like this exit detail that runs right into the park entrance, and then just some of these other traffic details. And we have two restaurants back here. Here's a McDonald's on this side with a pretty nice little drive-through area with a lot of details through there. To order windows and things like that. Definitely feels like a more modern McDonald's, kind of like their current style is going. And then over here we have a Sonic Drive-In with all the little drive-in booths on either side, and then the actual structure here inside. I'm assuming it's a Sonic because it looks like a Sonic and the colors are red and yellow. but it could be a more local variety. So very nicely done as far as that goes. And then just looking at all the traffic light details and things like that. In the parking lot, I would have considered potentially removing some of the cars so they're not just all stocked in there. We do have some empty spaces further down here, but folks leave during the day and don't necessarily come and refill it. So it would have been nice to see that stuck in there a little bit more, but definitely well thought out and looking good. A little bit plain on some of these other bits and pieces, but you have the train coming through here. It would have been cool to have this. Again, I like ride naming as a convention to tell you what you're looking at. So tell me what kind of train line this is, even if you don't have the trains moving back and forth, which can get messy sometimes. So I kind of appreciate that there's no moving traffic on here or moving trains, so it does have this nice natural feel to it. But just something to consider as far as naming rides goes. It doesn't take any extra time, and you do a lot of good with it, I think. And then there's farmland along the backside here, and then a couple of farm pieces along the back here, which I really do like these irrigation elements out here in the here, and then you have your canal on the backside here. It looks like a little peep jam of the handyman, but these are really nice, good details through that whole space. Alrighty, so I think that will do it for this park review. Lots to see, and it was actually expanded. There's another file that Coupon released a little bit later that expands this out and takes the water park away in favor of an SLC and a go-kart track over here. Actually, that might have been a kind of prequel before. I'm not sure which one came first, the water park or all of that, but it looks good, and I will post that link in the download or in the description in case you want to take a look at that one also. But this is Baker Lake Amusement Park by Coupon, a gold-winning park on New Element. I think you could have probably made the argument for Spotlight also, because there is a lot of high-quality stuff here, and it's pretty well done. Some little details that can certainly be cleaned up. I know he's working on a new park now, so that is kind of highly anticipated. But we're looking forward to more of that. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this review, and I will be back with more later this week. So until next time, thank you very much for watching.